The escape pod screamed through the atmosphere of Keshra 7, trailing smoke and fire across the violet sky. Inside, Captain Jonas Reed gripped the failing controls, his knuckles white as the console sparked and died. The twin suns blazed overhead, turning the endless desert below into an ocean of copper and gold. He whispered a prayer to no one in particular as the ground rushed up to meet him. The impact threw him against the harness, hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. Metal shrieked and tore. Glass shattered. Then silence, broken only by the hiss of coolant leaking from ruptured pipes and the low moan of wind across the dunes. Jonas hung suspended for a moment, tasting blood, feeling the heat already seeping through the damaged hull. His ship, the Meridian, was gone, destroyed in orbit by weapons he never saw coming. He was alone on a world that wasn't supposed to be inhabited. He released the harness and dropped to the tilted floor, pain shooting through his ribs. His survival suit was torn at the shoulder, the environmental seal compromised. The air that leaked in was thin, but breathable, carrying strange mineral scents, and something else, something almost sweet. Jonas grabbed the emergency pack and triggered the hatch release. It opened with a reluctant groan, and the heat rolled in like a physical wall. Stepping onto the sand felt like stepping onto another plane of existence. The wind pulled at him, and the twin suns cast double shadows that stretched long and strange. He turned slowly, scanning the horizon for any sign of civilization, water, shelter, anything. Nothing but dunes in every direction, their crests sharp as broken glass. What he didn't see was the figure watching from behind a formation of red stone about 200 meters away. Nira pressed herself against the rock, her heart beating faster than it should. She had been collecting mineral samples when the human vessel fell from the sky like a dying star. Her people, the Velkari, had detected the ship in orbit hours ago and issued strict orders to all surface teams to avoid contact. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous, too volatile in their emotions and actions. But Nira was a xenobiologist, and curiosity was a trait even genetic modification hadn't completely erased from her kind. She watched the human male through her optical enhancer, noting his physical structure, his movements, the way he scanned his surroundings with both caution and determination. He was taller than her species, broader in the shoulders, his skin darker than the pale silver of her own people. And then the wind shifted. The scent hit her like a physical force. Nira gasped, her hand flying to her chest as something deep inside her body seemed to wake from a long sleep. It was warm, complex, layered with minerals and proteins, and something indefinable that made her skin tingle. Her people had lost their sense of smell generations ago, engineered away as unnecessary, yet somehow she could detect this. Her silver skin flushed with faint rose tones, reactions she'd only read about in ancient medical texts. Jonas was trying to get his bearings when he heard it, soft sound like sand shifting. He spun, hand moving to the plasma pistol at his hip. But the charge indicator showed red. Empty. He waited, every muscle tense, scanning the rock formations. Something was out there. He could feel eyes on him, an instinct honed through years of combat and exploration. Nia knew she should leave, should report this to the council and let them handle the situation according to protocol. But her body wouldn't obey. Her legs carried her forward around the rock into the open. She heard herself call out in standard Galactic common, her voice shakier than she intended. "Human, you are injured." Jonas turned to face her, and for a moment neither could speak. She was unlike anything in his cultural database. Tall and elegant with skin that seemed to shimmer between silver and rose. Large eyes, the color of deep water, delicate features that were somehow both alien and achingly familiar. She wore a form-fitting suit that looked organic, and her hands, though they had 6 fingers instead of 5, were graceful as she raised them in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. "I need water," he managed, his throat dry from the crash and the heat. "Shelter. My ship's gone." Nira took another step closer, drawn by that scent, by the heat radiating from his body, by something she had no name for. Her training screamed warnings, but a deeper, older part of her whispered different words. Help him, know him, understand what he is. She reached into her collection pack and pulled out a hydration capsule, holding it out to him. "Take this. It will help." Her accent was strange, musical, but her words were clear. "I have a shelter nearby in the canyon. You cannot survive out here when the suns reach peak." Jonas accepted the capsule, their fingers brushing for just a moment. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, something electric and warm. Nira pulled her hand back quickly, her eyes wide, her skin now definitely showing rose undertones. She turned away, trying to hide her reaction. "Follow me."
No.
Quickly, there are others who might not be as helpful. The canyon shelter was a marvel of natural formation and ancient construction. Red stone walls rose high on either side, providing shade from the merciless suns, while deeper inside, carved chambers showed evidence of a civilization long gone. Nira led Jonas through narrow passages, her movements fluid and certain, until they reached a small chamber where she had set up her research equipment. Soft bioluminescent panels cast blue-green light across walls covered in strange symbols. Jonas collapsed against the cool stone, finally allowing himself to feel the full extent of his injuries. His ribs screamed with every breath, and his shoulder where the suit had torn was already showing early signs of radiation, burned from exposure to the twin suns. Nira knelt beside him, her medical scanner humming as it passed over his body. She tried to focus on the readings, but that scent kept overwhelming her sensors, her thoughts, everything. "You have 3 fractured ribs and second-degree burns on your shoulder and neck," she said, her voice professional, despite the trembling in her hands. "I can treat these, but you must remove your suit." Jonas looked at her, seeing the slight flush in her silver skin, the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet his. There was something happening here beyond first aid. Could feel it in the air between them, thick and charged. He nodded and began unfastening the suit, wincing as movement pulled at damaged muscle and bone. When he pulled it down to his waist, exposing his chest and the angry burns across his shoulder, Nira's breath caught audibly. She had seen human anatomy in holographic form during her xenobiology training, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. His skin was so different from hers, warm brown instead of silver, marked with old scars that told stories of survival. Covered in a light layer of moisture that carried that intoxicating scent. Her hands moved to treat his wounds, applying regenerative gel from her medical kit, but every touch sent waves of sensation through her body that she couldn't understand. "Your people," Jonas said, his voice rough with pain and something else. "They don't sweat, do they?" "No." Nira's response was barely a whisper. "We regulated our biology centuries ago. Removed unnecessary functions, optimized efficiency. No longer perspire, no longer produce pheromones, no longer feel the intensity of physical responses." She paused, her hand resting on his chest as she applied the gel to his burns. Beneath her palm she could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. "We chose logic over sensation." "Sounds lonely," Jonas said, watching her face. In the blue-green light she was breathtaking, alien, yet somehow familiar, as if his DNA remembered something his mind didn't. "Do you regret it? The trade?" Nira met his eyes finally, and the connection was immediate and profound. "I never knew to regret it until today, until I scented you. Till something inside me that was supposed to be dormant forever began to wake." Her voice dropped lower, intimate in the quiet chamber. "My body is responding to you in ways that should not be possible. My skin changes color when you're near. My heart rate increases. I feel warm, too warm, as if I'm developing a fever, but the scanner shows I'm healthy." Jonas reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her face. Her skin was smooth and cool, but where his fingers made contact, it warmed and flushed deeper rose. Nira closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, despite every protocol screaming in her mind. This was forbidden, dangerous, impossible, yet it felt more right than anything she'd ever experienced. "What's happening to us?" he asked. I think Nira opened her eyes, and they seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "We are remembering something our species forgot. Before the genetic divisions, before we chose different evolutionary paths, there was a connection. The ancient texts mention it briefly before the censors removed most references. a biological bond between human and Velkari strong enough to change both species. She didn't pull away from his touch. Instead, she brought her own hand up to cover his, pressing it more firmly against her face. The warmth spread through her entire body now, and she could feel changes beginning, subtle shifts in her chemistry. Her neural pathways lighting up in patterns that hadn't fired in generations of her people. "Is it dangerous?" Jonas asked, though he wasn't sure he cared about the answer. Being close to her felt necessary, essential, like water after days in the desert, Nira admitted. "The Council will sense the changes in me if they scan the area. They will come. They will try to separate us, to study what's happening, to prevent the spread of what they'll call contamination."
Oh.
She moved closer, until they were sharing breath in the small space. But I don't want to stop. For the first time in my life, I feel truly alive. Jonas pulled her closer with his good arm, ignoring the pain in his ribs. When their lips met, it was gentle at first, exploratory, two different species learning a new language, and something deeper took over. Heat bloomed between them, and Nira gasped against his mouth as her body surged with sensations she'd never known. Her skin glowed brighter now, shifting from rose to warm gold, and Jonas felt an answering warmth spreading through his own chest, his veins seeming to carry light instead of blood. They pulled apart, breathing hard, staring at each other in wonder and slight fear at what they'd just awakened. "This changes everything," Nira whispered, her fingers still tangled in his hair, her forehead resting against his. "There's no going back to who we were before this moment." Jonas smiled, despite the danger, despite the impossibility of their situation. "Good. I've never been very good at going back anyway." The sandstorm came without warning, as they often did on Keshra 7. One moment the canyon was bathed in the strange double sunset, and the next, the wind was howling like a living thing, driving walls of crimson sand through every gap and crevice. Nira and Jonas retreated deeper into the carved chambers, sealing the entrance with an emergency barrier field from Nira's equipment. The barrier hummed softly, barely audible over the roar outside. They were alone now in a way that felt both dangerous and inevitable. The chamber they'd chosen was smaller than the first, more intimate, with walls that seemed to absorb sound and a floor covered in the remnants of some ancient civilization's dwelling. Jonas sat on his bedroll from the emergency pack, his injuries already healing faster than normal thanks to Nira's treatment, though his ribs still ached when he breathed too deeply. Nira paced the small space, her skin cycling through shades of rose and gold, unable to settle on one color. The biological changes were accelerating, and she could feel her body rewriting itself at a cellular level. Ancient genetic sequences were activating, traits that had been locked away for thousands of years, suddenly expressing themselves. She was warmer now, her body temperature rising to match Jonas's, and she'd started sweating, an impossible development that both fascinated and frightened her. "You need to rest," Jonas said, watching her pace. "Whatever's happening to you, burning through your energy fighting it, isn't going to help." "I'm not fighting it," Nira said, then paused, realizing that was a lie. "I'm trying to understand it. My people spent centuries perfecting our biology, removing what we saw as weaknesses, and now all that work is unraveling because of your presence." "Is that what I am?" Jonas asked, his voice carrying an edge. "A contaminant? A virus undoing your perfection?" Nira stopped pacing and looked at him. Really looked at him. In the soft light of the bioluminescent panels, he looked almost otherworldly himself, strong and solid and undeniably alive in a way her people had forgotten how to be. She moved to him slowly, kneeling beside the bedroll, her eyes level with his. "No," she said softly. "You're the cure to a sickness we didn't know we had." Jonas reached for her, and this time there was no hesitation. He pulled her down beside him, careful of his injuries, and she came willingly, curling against his warmth. The contact was electric, their bodies fitting together, despite their differences. Nira's head rested on his chest, and she could hear his heartbeat steady and strong, a rhythm that her own heart began to match. "Tell me about your world," Jonas said, his hand stroking her hair, which was fine as silk and seemed to shimmer with an inner light. "What's it like when everything is perfect and logical?" Nira closed her eyes, remembering. "Beautiful, efficient. Everyone has a purpose, a role carefully designed to benefit the whole. There's no conflict, no chaos, no waste. Our cities float above our oceans, crystalline structures that catch the light of our blue sun and cast rainbows across the water. Art is mathematically perfect. Music follows precise algorithms. Love is a carefully arranged bond between compatible genetic profiles. She paused, her voice dropping. And it's all completely empty. Did you ever have someone? A partner? Yes, his name was Torin. We were matched by the Genetics Council when we reached maturity. He was kind, intelligent, compatible in every measurable way. We shared living space for 3 cycles, performed our duties, contributed to the gene pool. But I never felt anything like what I feel when you touch me. I never understood that we were living half-lives until this moment. Jonas tightened his arm around her, feeling protective and possessive in equal measure. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside their small chamber, they created their own weather. Nira shifted, rising up on one elbow to look down at him, her hair falling around them like a curtain.
Show me,
she whispered. Show me what it means to feel everything. Their second kiss was deeper, more urgent than the first. Jonas rolled carefully, bringing her beneath him, his weight supported on his good arm. Nira's hands explored his back, his shoulders, learning the geography of his body through touch. Her skin was fever-warm now, glowing brighter with every heartbeat, and Jonas felt that strange warmth in his own veins intensifying, as if her transformation was calling to something dormant in his own DNA. When Jonas kissed her neck, Nira gasped, her back arching, sensations she'd never experienced flooding through her nervous system. Her suit seemed suddenly too restrictive, and she reached for the seal at her throat. Jonas helped her, peeling the organic material away to reveal her glowing skin. She was magnificent, her body lean and elegant. Her silver skin now predominantly gold, marked with swirling patterns that seemed to pulse with light. You're beautiful, Jonas breathed, tracing the patterns with his fingertips. Each touch left trails of brighter light, as if he was painting on her skin with luminescence. They made love slowly, carefully learning each other's rhythms and responses. For Nira, every sensation was new and overwhelming, pleasure building in waves that crashed through her body. For Jonas, there was a deeper connection forming with each moment. As if their nervous systems were syncing, their thoughts and feelings bleeding across the boundary between them. He could feel her wonder, her pleasure, her growing confidence, and she could sense his care. His restraint, despite his desire, his determination to make this perfect for her. When they finally reached completion together, the chamber exploded with light. The patterns on Nira's skin blazed like contained stars, and Jonas's veins glowed with answering radiance. The energy burst outward in a shockwave that short-circuited the bioluminescent panels and overloaded Nira's equipment. For a moment, they were the only light source in the chamber, 2 beings burning bright enough to hold back any darkness. Then the light faded gradually, leaving them tangled together, breathing hard, their skins still touching at every possible point. Nira's transformation had completed during their union. She was something new now, not quite Valkyrie, not human, but a bridge between both. Her skin retained its new warmth and color, settling into a beautiful burnished gold, and her eyes, when she opened them, held flecks of amber mixed with the deep blue. It was she started, then stopped, unable to find words in any language. Jonas kissed her forehead gently, understanding without need for explanation. Outside, the sandstorm was beginning to fade, but inside, something far more powerful had been born. A connection that would soon shake the foundations of 2 civilizations, all because one alien girl stopped to help one fallen human, and they dared to touch despite everything saying they shouldn't. Morning arrived with harsh clarity. The twin suns rose over a desert swept clean by the storm, revealing new landscapes where dunes had shifted and ancient structures had been uncovered. Jonas woke first, his body still humming with residual energy from the transformation they'd undergone together. Nira slept curled against him, her gold skin dimmed to a soft glow, her breathing deep and peaceful. He watched her for a long moment, marveling at how completely his life had changed in less than 2 days. Then he heard it, the high-pitched whine of atmospheric engines, cutting through the morning silence. His combat instincts snapped into focus immediately. He gently shook Nira awake, his hand covering her mouth to prevent any surprised outcry. Her eyes flew open, briefly showing panic before she recognized him, and calmed. He removed his hand and pointed upward, toward the sound. Nira's expression went from peaceful to terrified in an instant. She sat up, reaching for her scanner, but Jonas caught her wrist. "Too late for that," he whispered. "If they're close enough to hear, they've already detected us. We need to move now." They gathered their essentials in under a minute, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who understood survival. Nira led them through a secondary passage she'd mapped during her research, a narrow tunnel that angled downward into the canyon's depths. Behind them, the sound of the engines grew louder. Joined by the distinctive crack of energy weapons cutting through stone, they emerged from the tunnel into a vast underground chamber that took Jonas's breath away. It was enormous, Isley, the size of a football stadium, with walls covered in luminescent algae that cast everything in soft green light. But the true wonder was the structure in the center, a massive circular platform covered in the same symbols they'd seen in the smaller chambers, surrounded by pillars that reached up toward the distant ceiling. "What is this place?" Jonas asked, his voice echoing strangely in the vast space. "Ancient Valkyrie ruins," Nira said, her scanner finally active again, showing multiple heat signatures converging on their position from above. "From before the genetic modification program, my dissertation theorized that Keshra 7 was a meeting place, neutral ground where humans and Valkyrie conducted joint research before the Great Division. But the Council buried my findings, said I was seeing patterns where none existed." "They lied," Jonas said, examining the pillars more closely. The symbols weren't just decorative. There were instructions, schematics, diagrams, showing human and Valkyrie DNA intertwining. They knew this place existed. They've always known. An energy bolt struck the ground 10 meters from them, sending up a spray of ancient stone dust. They spun to see 3 Valkyrie enforcers dropping through an opening in the ceiling, their armor matte black against the green glow. Weapons trained on Nira and Jonas. The lead enforcer removed his helmet, revealing features similar to Nira's, but cold, expressionless. Skin still the traditional silver. "Nira of House Valern," the enforcer said, his voice carrying the flat affect of someone who had voluntarily undergone additional emotional dampening. "You are hereby detained for genetic contamination and violation of first contact protocols. The human will be secured for biological study," Krell Nira said, and Jonas heard both familiarity and disappointment in her voice. "You know me. We studied together at the academy. You must see what I've discovered here proves everything we were taught was incomplete." "What I see," Krell replied, his weapon never wavering, "is someone who has allowed base biological impulses to override logic and duty. You are no longer Velkar, Nira. You are contaminated, compromised, dangerous." Jonas moved slightly in front of Nira, his empty plasma pistol raised despite its uselessness. "She's evolved. Your people chose stagnation and called it perfection, but she found a way forward." The other 2 enforcers spread out, flanking them, cutting off any escape routes. Jonas could feel Nira's fear spiking, her hand finding his, their fingers lacing together. The moment they touched, he felt it, a surge of awareness expanding outward. Suddenly he could sense her thoughts, her emotions, her entire being as clearly as his own, and she could sense him, his determination. His tactical assessment of the situation, his absolute refusal to let them separate. The connection went deeper, and Jonas gasped as knowledge flooded into him. Things Nira knew about this place, about the ancient technology, about how their joined energy might activate systems long dormant. She felt his combat experience, his understanding of how to fight when outgunned, his countless narrow escapes. And sudden strategies formed in the shared space of their minds. Without speaking, they moved as one. Nira pulled them sideways as Jonas yanked her close, and an energy bolt meant for her chest missed by centimeters. They ran for the central platform, the enforcers firing repeatedly, each shot getting closer. Jonas felt burn across his calf as one bolt clipped him, but adrenaline and something else. Something flowing from Nira through their connection kept him moving. They reached the platform and Nira's hand slammed down on the central symbol. Nothing happened for a heartbeat, then the entire chamber lit up like a star-going nova. Pillars blazed with golden light, lines of energy racing across the floor in intricate patterns, and the air itself seemed to crystallize into visible waves. The enforcers fell back, their weapons shorting out in the energy surge. Jonas and Nira stood at the center of the platform, the light spiraling around them, lifting them inches off the ground. The symbols on the walls began to move, rearranging themselves, and holographic images burst into existence throughout the chamber. They showed what Jonas and Nira had guessed: humans and Valkyrie working together, not as separate species, but as complementary halves of a greater whole. They showed transformation chambers where willing participants from both species underwent changes that brought them closer together. They showed a golden age of cooperation and discovery, and they showed why it ended. Fear. Fear from both sides that this blending would erase individual identity, that it would lead to a loss of cultural uniqueness. The Valkyrie chose genetic purity through modification, eliminating the traits that made them compatible with humans. Humanity scattered across the stars, forgetting that once they'd had partners among the stars who understood them in ways no other humans could. The holographic display faded, leaving Jonas and Nira glowing with absorbed energy, changed in ways neither could fully understand yet. They turned to find Krell and his team staring, not with weapons raised, but with something like wonder breaking through their carefully maintained emotional control. "Impossible," Krell whispered, his hand unconsciously moving to his chest, where his heart was suddenly beating faster than it had in years. The energy from the ancient platform dissipated slowly, leaving Jonas and Nira standing in its center, surrounded by enforcers who were no longer certain what they were supposed to do. The light show had affected all of them. Even through their emotional dampening, they could feel something stirring, ancient genetic memories awakening in response to what they'd witnessed. Krell recovered his composure first, though his hand trembled slightly as he reactivated his weapon. "This changes nothing. You have violated sacred laws, Nira. The human must be contained." "No." The voice came from above, clear and commanding. Everyone looked up to see another figure descending through the opening. But this one wore no armor, just the flowing robes of a Valkyrie High Council member. She landed gracefully, and Jonas heard Nira's sharp intake of breath. "Kessa," Nira whispered, and through their connection, Jonas felt her surge of emotion. Sister, older by one cycle, council prodigy, the one who'd always followed the rules perfectly. Kessa walked forward, her silver skin showing the first hints of rose color as she approached the platform. She studied Jonas with curiosity rather than hostility, then turned her attention to Nira. "You've done something extraordinary, little sister. Something that frightens them so much they sent me to bring you back before the truth spreads, and will you?" Nira asked, her voice steady despite the fear Jonas could feel flowing through their bond. "Will you help them bury this again?" Kessa was quiet for a long moment, her eyes moving between Nira and Jonas, noting their clasped hands, the matching gold glow beneath their skin, the way they stood as one unit despite being two separate beings. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small device, no larger than her palm. "This contains all the censored research about human Valkyrie bonding," she said. "Historical records, genetic analyses, accounts from the last bonded pairs before the division. I've been the keeper of forbidden knowledge for 5 years, reading what our people chose to forget." She looked directly at Jonas. "I know what you are, human. You're a catalyst, a reminder of what we sacrificed for our precious purity." She turned back to Nira, and her voice softened with emotion that shouldn't exist in a High Council member. "And I know what you've become, sister. You're free in a way none of us have been for generations. I can see it in your eyes, feel it in the way the air moves around you. You're alive." Krell stepped forward, his weapon still raised, but his voice uncertain. "Counselor Kessa, your orders were clear. We are to bring them both to the capital for processing." "My orders were clear," Kessa agreed. Then she did something shocking. She threw the data device to Nira, who caught it instinctively. But I choose not to follow them. Not anymore. The chamber went utterly silent. An enforcer dropped his weapon in shock. Kessa, perfect Kessa, model citizen and council member, was committing treason. And she was doing it calmly, deliberately, as if she'd been planning this moment for years. You're all feeling it, Kessa said, addressing the enforcers now. Ever since you entered this chamber, something inside you has been waking up. Your heart rate increases. Your skin changes color. You feel warm, uncomfortable, alive in ways you haven't since childhood, before your emotional dampening treatments. Right. She paused. That's not contamination. That's remembering who we really are. Krell's weapon lowered slightly. But the council, the laws, everything we've built was built on fear and lies, Kessa interrupted. We chose cold logic over warm chaos, and we've been slowly dying as a species ever since. Our birth rates decline every generation. Our art becomes more sterile. Our music loses meaning. We exist, but we've forgotten how to live. She turned back to Jonas and Nira, stepping onto the platform with them. The moment her feet touched the ancient metal, symbols blazed to life again, recognizing Valkyrie DNA that hadn't been completely locked away yet. Show them, she said to Jonas. Show them what it means to choose life over perfection. Jonas looked at Nira, silently asking permission. She nodded, and together they opened their connection, not just between themselves, but outward, broadcasting what they felt through the energy still thrumming in the platform. The emotional wave hit everyone in the chamber like a physical force. Love, fierce and protective. Joy, bright as sunshine. Fear, honest and driving them forward. Hope, burning eternal. Desire, primal and unashamed. Wonder at each other, at the universe, at every moment shared. The enforcers staggered under the assault of genuine emotion. One dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face, the first tears his body had produced in 15 years. Another laughed, the sound breaking like glass, because he'd forgotten how. Krell stood frozen, his silver skin flickering through a dozen different colors, as his body tried to process feelings it had been designed never to experience again.
Ow.
This is what we gave up, Kessa said. Her own skin now more rose than silver. This is what they're offering back to us. Krell's weapon clattered to the ground. He looked at his hands, watching the colors shift beneath his skin, feeling his heart pound with something other than just biological necessity. When he looked up at Nira, his eyes were wet. What do we do now? He asked, and his voice carried vulnerability instead of authority. Jonah spoke for the first time since Kessa's arrival. You choose. You can report this, try to shut it down, keep living in your perfect, empty cities. Or you can help us spread this, remind your people of what they lost. Give them the chance to reclaim it. The council will fight us, one of the other enforcers said. But it didn't sound like he was arguing against it. Just stating a fact. Let them, Kessa said, her voice carrying steel now. We have the evidence, the ancient technology, and most importantly, we have proof that the bonding works. She gestured to Jonas and Nira. They are not contaminated or corrupted. They're whole in a way none of us have been for centuries. The chamber filled with the hum of more ships arriving. The council wasn't going to let this go quietly. Jonas pulled Nira close, ready to run again, to fight if necessary, but she placed her hand on his chest, calming him. We don't run anymore, she said softly, her eyes glowing gold and determined. This ends here, one way or another. Kessa nodded, moving to stand beside them, and slowly, one by one, the enforcers joined them on the platform. When the council ships descended and armed forces poured into the chamber, they found not fugitives ready to be captured, but a group united, standing on ancient ground, glowing with the light of a truth that refused to stay buried any longer at the center of it all. An alien girl who couldn't understand why humans felt so different held hands with the human, who'd shown her the answer was simple, because humans never forgot how to feel everything. And now, she wouldn't forget either. Their love had awakened something that would spread like wildfire through the Valkyrie population, an evolution not of body, but of heart. and no council decree could stop what had already begun. The choice that would change everything had been made, not by leaders or laws, but by two beings who dared to touch despite every reason not to, and found that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is remember how to be alive. The end.